another meeting on impeachment.
Right. This is you caught us. I went live as we were discussing the logistics for today's fine print. So it seems like we have a pretty hard stop in an hour. So I got to be less wordy and more efficient with my participation in the fine print. We're very happy to be back, and the world seemed to have done a not so terrible job of surviving our absence, but here we are again. I think that one of the what we're discussing is one of the there's a very important race that has become a nationalized race, and this nationalized race is unique in character and its attributes. It's a nationalized race that's not about a Democrat running against a Republican. You know, it's a Republican who has declared his independence of the MAGA machine and of Trump. You know, in my opinion, he's remained faithful to the values that Republicans have traditionally held. You know, which is not to have an aggressive foreign policy, invading the world. Republicans have on the most part, been more of a party of wanting to intervene less in the world, and less inclined to impose, our values on other people. And to the extent that we try and impact our values on other people, it's in the sense of the way George Washington had suggested we do it, which is no permanent alliances and to engage in trade with other countries. And the Republicans had been the party of limited government and fiscal responsibility. So the person who has been most outspoken in Congress, on behalf of traditional Republican values, has been Thomas Massie, and Thomas Massie has had the courage to challenge Trump when Trump has tried to bring a new brand of, I don't know, I tend to refer to it as a MAGA party, not a Republican party, and it's a MAGA takeover of the Republican Party. And so basically, MAGA has gone to war with Thomas Massie, declared war on Thomas Massie. They've been joined by other groups like AIPAC, who want the U.S. to take a very aggressive role in the Mideast and an aggressive role on behalf of Israel. So Massie is challenging all that, and so he's not only facing the MAGA universe, he's also facing the pro-Israel lobby, and this has become the most nationalized and important election, and it's unique because it's all within one party. So with that introduction, Bruce, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. I just add a few additional points. One is that it's not being the aggressive foreign policy really is a euphemism for being an empire. It means you're doing a foreign policy not based upon invincible self-defense and mutually beneficial trade. You have a foreign policy that celebrates dominating the world, force for the sake of force. And we see that not only right now in Iran, Ukraine, we said in Venezuela, maybe soon in Greenland, Nigeria, anywhere you look. And probably I believe that we'll find it in the inability to resolve our conflict with China at the summit. I think there will be nothing other than more antagonism. Trump will probably call President Xi a few names, something or otherwise. But putting that aside, I think we want to underscore that President Trump himself has appeared and campaigned in Thomas Massie's district. He's used vile language in criticizing Mr. Massie. I don't want to repeat it on this program. all the things that are demeaning. And really, it's ironic that it's Thomas Massie who really represents at least the campaign planks of Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump has abandoned them all. He's not to make America great again. He wants to make himself great again, and the United States to not to be concerned about itself, but to the world, including Israel. He's gone out of its way to have the government involved in all aspects of the economy, whether it's in steel, whether it's defense contractors, whether it's drugs, government takeovers, the exact thing that he deplored with regard to so-called socialism of his opponent in 2024, Kamala Harris. He's engaged in trade wars, the tariffs that he has imposed, usurping the power of revenue that Congress enjoys, invalidated in part by the Supreme Court. The refund's underway, but then he's issued a new tariff program that's also been held illegal, but still is hiking inflation that joins with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, that's finding expression in your grocery prices and agricultural produce everywhere. So Thomas is someone who's also campaigned against, our 36, 37, 38 trillion dollar national debt, having no fiscal discipline whatsoever. He has urged, we need a smaller government, not a bigger government. And Mr. Trump is in the opposite direction. And it seems small, but I think the fact that we have Mr. Trump wanting to put his name and face everywhere, right down the street from my offices. Now, the Labor Department is a big picture of Donald Trump. It's like Mao in Beijing. And then you have Trump's name on the Kennedy Center. You have Trump's name, I'm sure. It's gone the reflecting pool. The ballroom will be called Trump. I fly occasionally to Palm Beach International Airport. It's now being changed to Trump. Anyway, that indicates there's an earmark of government narcissism that is the opposite of what Massie and the Republicans used to stand for. So I think that the campaign concludes on May 19th. It's a close race. I think Massie is ahead a few points now, but it's no longer a campaign between Massie and Mr. Gallwright, his opponent, who simply is an echo chamber of Mr. Trump. It's a campaign really for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. And if Mr. Massie wins, I think that's an earthquake, Richter 7 on the Richter scale. It's going to change the whole dynamic, especially with regard to the very great hesitation Democrats have now on moving forward with any kind of impeachment resolutions or hearings. Now, this last week, Congressman John Larson I work with, he's Democrat from Connecticut, a centrist, introduced a House Resolution 1155. I drafted it. It's 13 articles of impeachment. It hasn't come to a floor vote yet. We're urging that there be at least informal hearings to educate the American people about the counter-revolution against July 4, 1776 that Mr. Trump has undertaken, at least in his second term, and that now we confront a choice. You're either for the patriots who signed their death warrants on July 4th, risking their lives for unalienable rights, or you're for King George III and a return to monarchy and despotism. That's what the country confronts today, and that I believe that will be the issue that will be decided largely on May 19th in Mr. Massie's campaign. Now, both I and I think Dennis have been talking to Democrats, trying to encourage them to at least hold hearings so that American people understand impeachable offenses and the danger that Mr. Trump has created to our entire dispensation. And I repeat as many times as I can, if Mr. Trump's usurpations, including the authority to commit murder, go to criminal wars of aggression, spy on everyone without warrants, is not repudiated, no succeeding president is given that power back. We're in a despotism and we can't climb out of it again. Executives do not surrender power back voluntarily. And if Congress acquiesces on what Mr. Trump has done, I think we're done as a republic.
I would, your description of the Massie race, Bruce, cannot be improved on much, but I'm going to try to add some more content to it. Massie represents a true conservative position that has historically, as has been pointed out by both of you, uh, been aligned with smaller government, with careful management of the people's tax dollars, with minimizing debt and avoiding adding to debt, with avoiding conflicts abroad, not going around the world looking for dragons to slay. And he really does represent his constituency in Kentucky. Now, in previous primaries, he has taken 70 to 80% of the vote. This time, the President of the United States and the President's fundraising machine and AIPAC have gone to work to raise extraordinary amounts of money in a congressional race to try to knock Massey out. The president famously said that he didn't care who could run, he just wanted a warm body to run against Massey, someone to prop up so that Massey would have a contest and conceivably be defeated. So this is, is from the Trump campaign standpoint, this is not about the people of Kentucky. This is not about the people of Massey's district. This is about a power play to try to silence a voice of true conservative republicanism who has not only challenged the financial practices of the administration, but who also has fearlessly brought forward the moral equation of what's happening with the Epstein files and of the conduct of high-ranking people that evokes horror stories in their recitation. So he has shown extraordinary courage, and his opponent could have been anybody, but it's really Donald Trump. And when the election leaves, if Massey were not to win, the people will have a congressman in name only because of the forces that have come together to try to knock Massey out. Now, I want to point out that when spending in a congressional district reaches the level that it has in this district in Kentucky, it's an obscenity. I've run for Congress many times. I've served 8 terms. And I have never seen this kind of money involved in a campaign, even in $26. It doesn't even come close. This is 2 or 3 times the top amount of money that has ever been spent. This will set a benchmark for spending. But the money isn't coming from Kentucky. It's coming from outside of Kentucky. So here you have the people of Kentucky looking for representation in the Congress, having a right to representation in the Congress, and there's interests that are swooping in to try to deny them that. So this, as you say, Bruce, this Massey's re-election could have extraordinary impact nationally because of the forces that have been arrayed against him. And in some cases, those are the same forces that the American people are grappling with at this very moment that have resulted in our economy being in such trouble. So we'll have a lot to talk about. Maybe we should schedule our next meeting for next Wednesday so that we could dissect what happens.
We can do that. I'm fine with that. I would like to add some comments, as I almost always do. But some of my comments are questions. I think Trump's efforts that have been greatly successful, aggrandizing himself, have really like all the executive orders he has issued. His claims of executive powers have been beyond the scope of what anybody else has asserted during times where the nation was not in a war that was deemed an existential experience. Um, has anybody looked to celebrate themselves the way Trump, usually countries that have dictatorships, monarchies, are the type of leaders that spend a lot of time putting their face on the money, putting their name on all the public monuments, because they're branding themselves. That they're the gods, of their country, and everybody serves them. And that's the message they like to communicate, and they like to remind people by seeing those images of themselves, and that you should be grateful to them for everything that you have. So I have this question here. We had a guy once a number of years ago, okay? He led a small army that beat the most powerful empire at its time, a guy named George Washington. Some people might know that name, okay? So he beat the British, the most powerful empire in the world that gave us independence. So he did that, okay? We could go around saying, you know what? Even King George said, I'm the greatest guy living because after the war, I went home and went back to Mount Vernon and went back to just, being, Citizen George. Where's my buildings? Okay. Where's the Washington Monument? There are not enough buildings out there with my name on it. Then we say we need a new government. So he gets called up and said, hey, we need to write a constitution. It can't get done without you. You got to come here. You got to chair. You got to be this. You got to be the president of the Constitutional Convention. If not, if you don't show up, we're not going to get we're not going to have the legitimacy unless you're present. Okay. So did he name the convention after himself? Is this the Washington Constitution? Okay. Did what building did he insist should have his name on it? Okay. So, but of course, he's not as great as Trump. He accomplished a lot less. Defeating the British. Trump can't beat Iran. Okay. Trump beat the British. So we were the David that slayed Goliath, and now we're the Goliath that can't slay David. So, so if we look at the circumstances of him being called to duty, his answering the call, him running for office and getting 100% of the electoral vote, running again against his own desires, because he was convinced he was, again, a response to his sense of duty beyond himself. He wanted to go home. He was convinced the country needed him, and so that he could not go home, and he had to place his own personal desires. He placed the country above that because he stayed serving a second term that he didn't really want to serve. So that's service, okay? That's someone who's not says, I want to run for office. That's someone who people going down and say, Thomas Jefferson, no, you can't leave yet. We need you. No, I want to go home. We need you, okay? I'll reluctantly stay around, but after 2 terms, I'm gone. He ran a second time, okay? 100% of the electoral vote in his favor, okay? Then he retired and he gave a great address to the country, and he went home. I don't remember him going home and saying, gee, you know what? There are not enough buildings. That people are not talking about how great I am, okay? I got to go give more speeches to remind people how great I am, how I am the greatest. That country will never see a leader like me. Nobody's ever had more impact, on the country, than me. What were political virtues then seem to be political vices today. Okay, having any sense of humility, being a serious person, a serious thinker with serious views, with a level of integrity, and thinking that policy discussions, should be discussions, the type of arguments that occurred between Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton. These were serious conversations. This was not name calling of just saying, hey, Thomas, you're a moron, no, Alexander Hamilton, you're a loser. Okay? Was that the basis? If you look at their correspondence, Was that the correspondence Jefferson and Hamilton and Madison were doing when they exchanged? Were they exchanging substantive ideas, or were they just calling other people's names and just calling them morons, losers, and all the type of language that we use? So if you have to think about what are the political virtues that were the founding virtues of this country, okay, and how Trump has perverted those so that what were the virtues of our founders are considered vices today. That's the real perversion, okay? Is that exactly those virtues are now vices? And I think to extent, and I think the one that most approximates those virtues of the founding is Thomas Massey. And so we have all these people armed against somebody who is amongst the representatives, the most representative of those virtues. What does it say about us?
Yeah. Just to add what you've commented, Jeffrey, one, Washington repudiated the idea that he should be called His Excellency or have any royalty associated with it. The president was fine. Secondly, it wasn't just, he turned aside offers that some of his military subordinates suggested that he claim a crown. He said, no, I didn't fight this war, to have a different version of King George III. I fought the war to create a republic. And the last point, this is the one you're talking about, the deliberative processes. Washington would frequently ask Hamilton, you write on one side. First, we came to the Bank of the United States. Jefferson or Madison on the other side, he'd read them both and come up with his own conclusion. And I can guarantee you, go read those papers. They're state papers. They don't refer to ad hominem attacks. They're substantive. If you want to read papers about the issue of foreign policy, they're the Helvidius and Pacificus papers that you can get online about the worries of an excessive executive power over foreign diplomacy and war. And again, you'll see this is entirely substantive. No name calling, all replete with allusions to history and human nature. Those are the deliberative forces, not the kind of circus performances that you see oftentimes today. Trump appointees, whether it's Noam or whether it's Pam Bondi before the two were fired, or other appointees who go up to Congress and call names and make political statements, but there's very little substance involved in these kinds of oversight hearings. And I think that's the difference between a government where the deliberative forces prevail as opposed to a government where the arbitrary forces to prevail. And that's basically despotism. That's what we have at present.
The recitation that Jeffrey made deserves not just a close inspection, but needs to be looked at in terms of where our country is today. Trump recognized the divisions in the country in 2016 that came about, among other reasons, failure of the Democratic Party to be able to respond to the practical concerns of its constituency, the trade agreements that hollowed out Middle America, and he capitalized on it, and he was elected. But what has happened now is that we've seen an intensification of the divisions that were partisan to begin with, and the divisions have become so granular that they divided families, broke friendships. And we've seen that process of divisiveness exacerbated in rhetoric. The United States has, and is not just divided politically, but it's in many ways dividing spiritually now. So I saw this when I was at visiting Congress a couple of weeks ago, where the tone of the conversations between members of the administration and Congress were filled with invective, disrespect, and something that went beyond anything that I had witnessed in 16 years that I served. And so what you have is president as a reflector of a process but then at the same time intensifying it and creating a new type of narrative in the country that is ever more fractionating of America. And his attempt at encouraging Americans to participate in his own self-idolatry is so far and separate from what Americans generally expect of a leader. It's leadership is about the people. It isn't about the leader. And that thread has been lost a long time ago. So the implications of this are quite severe, not only for America on a domestic level, but for America internationally as well, because the lack of temperance, the lack of humility, the lack of patience, the arrogance, the misuse of power that reflects the conduct of one person is then identified as being what America stands for. And this is devastating for the country.
Yeah. And I want to go back to my view at this in a very generalized way, but I think it captures what we confront today. It's not all that different from Fort Sumter in April of 1861. You're either for the signatories of the Declaration of Independence or you're for King George III. There really isn't any ground for agnosticism, middle ground, one or the other. You're for those principles of individual unalienable rights, government by the consent of the governed, liberty as opposed to power, or you're for the despotism of King George III. That really is what Trump's given us a choice for, and he stated it himself. According to his statements, unrebutted to the New York Times, the only restraint on my power is my moral conscience, which doesn't exist. If that doesn't alarm you, it should. That is a statement of a king, not of a popularly elected individual subject to the rule of law.
But what's significant about these themes that are weaving through this conversation is the policy that results from the mentality. This is why Iran is a colossal blunder. This is why the Middle East policy is a disaster. This is why America's economy is in trouble. This is why there are trade blocs forming around and away from America. This is why the petrodollar is going to decline. This is why the elasticity in the American economy is going to decline. Politics extends from the personal and the character of the leaders, and whatever we see right now in terms of what not only is currently being visited upon America, but what you can foresee past the next election in terms of the economy is reflected directly on the very themes that Jeffrey brought up.
Yeah, but I think that those instrumental features of despotism are to be deplored. But I think that philosophically, it's just at war with who we are as a people. There are a lot of ingredients that go up into making economic prosperity, but the major one is you have a rule of law, and you reward individual merit, and you don't discriminate. Those are norms that you enforce with the Constitution. And basically, when we have abandoned the Constitution, which we have, those norms go away, and the consequences find expression in these horrible, horrible facets of life that we confront today. And that is, in the long run, if we abandon our philosophical principles, what gave birth to the United States itself, I don't think we can recover it, because we're not going to have investment where there's no rule of law. That's why, despite what Trump has said, go to Venezuela today, go to Gaza. Are you getting any investment there? No, whatever he says, there's peace. I mean, we're giving special preferences, or taking we're going to turn them into French Rivieras and 5-star hotels. Nothing happens there because everybody knows the risk is too great. That private enterprise can't be rewarded because there isn't any rule of law that prevents your property from being confiscated, immediately. And I mean, Trump, in some sense, that's what he's doing. He tells NVIDIA, you know what, I'm going to impose an export tax of 25% if you want to trade with China. Really? I mean, this is the government kind of corruption that we associate, again, with Xi or Putin. And that is going to persist unless we abandon this deference to limitless executive power and restore the Constitution.
Well, we're also going to see the difference between real estate development and human development.
Yeah, human capital is the most important capital you can have, which makes the xenophobia we have a self-inflicted wound. It's utterly ridiculous and causing lost jobs to Americans too. The businesses don't have the immigrants; they're going to fold, and everybody loses a job.
Jeffrey,
you have to go back to individual merit, unalienable rights, as Adam Smith pointed out in 1776. You have a tolerable, fair administration of justice, easy taxes, and peace. Everything else will work on its own. And that's how we grew from a tiny acorn into a huge oak economically in a century. Before then, we decided to become an empire. But we have to reestablish those principles. Otherwise, I don't see any way that we can recover. Even if the short run, maybe the price of gasoline falls below $5 a gallon or something like that. It's the philosophical and procedural underpinnings that we need to repair if we're going to take off and return to what I consider the grandeur of July 4th, 1776. Why it was Ralph Waldo Emerson said it was that shot heard round the world, because it wasn't just for America. The principles were universal.
Yeah. As I heard Dennis go through the list, of the adverse consequences that we have experienced since the beginning of this Trump administration, I think the part that should be remarkable to everyone is the fact that all of this impact has occurred in the absence of any deliberative process.
Yeah.
So that should be, if you look at the consequences, I don't know how any serious person could think that our system was designed so that one person could create all these consequences in the absence of any deliberative process whatsoever. Okay. All this has been done, the trade wars, the killings of people on the seas, the attacks on Iran, the global trade wars, the restrictions on these transactions that you referred to. All of this is done without any deliberative process whatsoever. All of it has been done without the consent of the governed. Okay, so the elections were not about electing despots. Okay, that's not how system is. We vote, the winner of the presidential election gets to be a despot. That's not our system. Okay, that's what people are justifying. They're justifying elected despotism. And anyone who I believe who doesn't believe that these are impeachable offenses, are basically saying, I don't mind being elected. I don't mind the existence of elected despotism. I just want to be the elected despot. So I'm competing for property rights to be the despot. Because if people were more concerned about the Constitution than having the keys to the kingdom, they would be impeaching, Trump. But more concerned about saying is, gee, I want to own the keys to the kingdom, and that's the point Bruce made, is I don't want to give back these powers claimed. I want to be the one to have them. So and in the context of, as you both were talking and I was thinking and listening to it, words, to me, there's even a greater consequence of Thomas Massey's primary. Okay, to me now, I would like to reframe it. Okay, in this 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, okay, Thomas Massey is the candidate that most if we want to give meaning to that celebration, you have to vote for Thomas Massey. Now, if that meaning means nothing to you, vote for the any warm body that is not Massey. Okay, so I think that was correctly framed by both Bruce and Dennis. So that's going to be a statement of us. Do we really want to give meaning to this anniversary of 250 years? Do we really care as a people about that? Then we should not go through the pretense of celebrating it. Okay, it's not just another day off to have a barbecue and see fireworks, and celebrate ourselves. We're supposed to be celebrating something that has some meaning to us, and apparently, it doesn't really have meaning to us, because if not, this would not be a close primary.
Yeah. If I would just want to read Jeffrey and Dennis, this is Article 2 of the Constitution. It's Article 2, Section 1, and it states, among other things, before he enter on the execution of his office, the president, he shall take the following oath. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That is before he's permitted to enter office. He has to take that oath. Now, Mr. Trump has openly said, I'm not constrained by the Constitution. I don't need to protect or defend or enforce the Constitution. The only thing I'm answerable to is my moral conscience. Whatever I say, that happens to be. Now, he basically said he's disqualified.
He created perjury when he took the oath.
Yes.
He perjured himself.
That is correct. And perjury is an impeachable offense. This particular element of perjury perhaps is the most grievous of all the perjuries you can commit in subscribing purporting to subscribe to the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, given concerns over his concerns about the consequences of losing a majority in the House and the Senate. We've seen extraordinary things happen in this midterm election. The extraordinary things I mean are an extraordinary Supreme Court ruling with respect to what really looks like is the eradication of the Voting Rights Act, and gerrymandering on steroids. I sent both of you an article I wrote. I didn't submit it for publication anywhere. I just shared it with you. And Thomas Madison and James Madison at the near the end of his life, he expressed his disappointment with the voting system, and he started embracing and wrote in correspondence, the appeal of some sort of Condorcet type of voting system of, some sort of, ranked choice votings or proportional representation. As he saw, while he had fears of the consequences factionalism would have, he began to see the fact that it happened sooner and with more adverse consequences than he had initially had anticipated, even though he did anticipate that this could be very, very bad if factionalism ended up not reinforcing checks and balances and didn't counter ambition, but actually amplified it. So, so this might, I don't know how much this might have a consequence, on the midterms elections, but is it time for us to reconsider another time? I mean, I believe it's time for reconsidering. This gerrymandering is basically disenfranchising a lot of people on both sides. I mean,
yes.
So on both. I don't mean this in a partisan sense. It's disenfranchised Democrats. It's disenfranchised because we have states that have a supermajority of representatives of a party, while if you looked at proportional representation, the proportional representation looks very, very different than the outcome of the representation of that government at Washington, D.C. So, do we really have equal justice under a gerrymandered system? Are people really, does every vote count the same in a gerrymandered system? So,
Let me make a couple of observations. I
I'd like
think
to
that,
both of your
Jeff,
feedback.
the more important component, I believe, is the separation of powers, the institutional separation. It was Republicans, and Dennis will remember, who went to President Nixon and said, "You got to resign. You committed impeachable offenses." The Barry Goldwaters, the Hugh Scotts, the John Rhodes. So that the loyalty has to be, to your institutions in order for the system to work. Now, I do believe that, and that doesn't happen anymore, because the loyalty is not to the Constitution and the institution. The loyalty is to the party, and so the Constitution is thrown into the trash can if it inhibits the ability of a party to, in the short run, make what they believe is a gain for itself. Now, I think that gerrymandering is not something that I applaud, but I think that we're overstating the consequences. Because let's compare the House of Representatives, where gerrymandering is rampant, with the Senate, where there's no gerrymandering because everybody runs statewide. But you find the polarization, the same kind of disease or malaise in the Senate as you find in the House. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two. They're both obeisant to limitless executive power. Putting that aside, I do believe that nonetheless gerrymandering discriminates on the basis of political affiliation. Congress could prohibit gerrymandering in their districts tomorrow. They have the authority to do that. It hasn't done it, but it could. That's the remedy. And I believe, and Dennis commented upon this, I believe that oftentimes the Republicans and Democrats say, "Hey, we'll gerrymander to make your seat safe so we can all get reelected." It can work as an incumbent safeguard against challenges. And you may have witnessed that, Dennis, in Ohio. Okay, the Republicans and Democrats, you would create a safe seat for you. You create a safe seat for us. So we don't have any primary challenges, which is the opposite of what we're trying to get here.
As someone who's gerrymandered out of office, I think I could probably speak to this by certain interest groups, which is another topic for another day. But look, the process of gerrymandering is inherently political. The Voting Rights Act sought to create a formula which would correct the inequities that can occur in gerrymandering by providing that there would be majority-minority districts. Now, right now, there are 63 African Americans in the House of Representatives. Strike that, 61. And there are 53 from members from the Latino Hispanic community. So many of those individuals had bargains were struck at a state level to protect districts. But what's happened is, with this administration, and we have to look at the mentality here, there is an implicit racism, I don't use that word lightly, in the policies of the administration that serve to diminish communities of color. And it's reflected in appointments, in promotions, in hiring, and in policies such as the SNAP program was affected adversely. It's reflected in the court case that was brought, that the Supreme Court made a decision, a Voting Rights Act that is setting off redistricting in many states, particularly in the South. Now, to be sure, the redistricting occurred in California to advantage the Democrats. Redistricting occurred in Virginia to advantage the Democrats. That was thrown out by their Supreme Court. Redistricting is a political issue, but so is race. And if redistricting is being done to eliminate the potential of people of color to get elected to Congress, that ought to be illegal. and it's not like it's guaranteed. People still have to run. In one case in Tennessee, Congressman Steve Cohen, who happens to be white, has represented a black district for years. I mean, that shows that it is possible for people to represent a community, notwithstanding what the racial issues ought to be, but people are still free there to elect their own. That district is being disappeared in a Tennessee redistricting. So why is all this being done? Because there is this notion that if the Republicans can redistrict enough areas, they may be able to protect their position in the House of Representatives, where currently they're on target to lose between 20 and 25 seats. And if there's a blue wave, they could lose a lot more. But wait, let me finish this thought. So what are the consequences of this? Well, the underlying assumption is they're going to pick up more seats. They may not. This could blow up in the face of the Republican Party. And it certainly will have impact in certain state elections by bringing out a protest vote from both from minority communities who represent a massive influence on state and national elections. So this could prove to be still another curses foiled again moment for those who are trying to protect the Trump agenda by fixing the outcome of the House races.
Yeah, I would just say, I think Trump is openly racist. I think perhaps the most vivid example is his conclusion that white South African Afrikaners are suffering. The only refugee group in the world that he lets come to the United States because they're white and purportedly suffering a genocide in South Africa. But not only that, I believe that his immigration policies, he's openly said, we want immigrants from Norway, from Scandinavia, but none from black countries, Africa, shithole countries like Nigeria or Haiti or whatever. Those are openly racist.
That was a quote I want to point out on your behalf.
Yeah, racist. And of course, we know that he doesn't disavow the likes of Nick Fuentes. He's an openly white supremacist. He figures there are good white supremacists in Charlottesville in 2017, shouting anti-Semitic slogans and anti-black slogans. So I don't think that there can be any doubt that Mr. Trump is a racist.
Well, I have some statistics here that so for when the Supreme Court says that there's like no correlation between, political gerrymandering that is partisan in politics and has nothing to do with race. Let's take a look at the numbers. A little over 85% of black voters voted for Harris in 2024. Biden got around 88% of the black vote. Obama got 94% of the black vote. Okay. I would think that John Roberts in the Supreme Court probably knows this. And so they understand that if you dilute and disenfranchise black voters, it has the same consequence of diluting and disenfranchising Democratic voters, since black voters are overwhelmingly Democratic. So how do you make a judgment that it's not about race? Okay, so when you see the consequences of taking districts that have a lot of black voters and distributing them into other districts where those black voters are now minorities, and you're asserting that they're equally likely to vote for any other party, and that other people are equally likely to vote for them. I mean, that's just there's no data supporting that, and these are not stupid people. I mean, it seems to me, it is very interesting to watch all the cases related to the crimes alleged of Trump were slow walked by the Supreme Court. Okay, they slow walked them. Okay, now here they look to do it to make sure that they have an impact on the midterm elections. A body that claims that they are above and they transcend politics clearly are trying to impact politics by the decisions they've made an effort to slow walk. and then the decisions they've made to try and accelerate. You know, how if you've been if you're a Black American or a minority American, how can you view the Supreme Court with any sense of legitimacy?
I would like to.
How can you believe what they say?
Uh, and that Voting Rights Act decision, may, as we go through the years, prove to be one of the more infamous decisions by a Supreme Court. I want to bring this down to a local level just for a moment, because I'm talking to you from Cleveland, Ohio, where I served in various capacities, including as mayor of Cleveland 49 years ago, and where Cleveland had a population of over 700,000. At the time, the city was pretty evenly balanced between African Americans and whites, with a small Hispanic constituency. When I was elected mayor, as a matter of fairness, I felt obligated that about half of my major appointments went to people in the Black community, so that you'd get a sense of belonging, of unity, of not just egalitarian principles, which are important, but it's important for people to understand that the process also belongs to them as well, and not just to a majority group based on race. And I look at, with those sensibilities, I look at where we are today, and it's pretty alarming, actually. And the government, our government right now, is going in a direction that is, in my estimation, contrary to the principles of the 14th Amendment, for example, that have been bedrock to enable people to feel that they're equal in the sense that there's political equality, and it's being chipped away in a majorly right now.
I can tell you, one is I like to think I'm sensitive to this issue because I'm a human being and a human being with sensitivities. But I can also disclose, that this also has. I've had personal experiences, and I can tell you why I've had personal experiences, because my ex-wife is Black. So I married first in 1977. A Black woman, a woman I met at the University of Chicago, and she was an elegant looking person, and was a conservative dresser, and I can tell you that I had incidences where I'd walk into a restaurant and I'd say I have a reservation, and they were seated. No, I'm waiting for my wife, and when my wife showed up, suddenly the restaurant had no tables available. They apologized to me that they had no tables, and they mistakenly took the reservation. That didn't happen until they see my wife. Now my wife looked like a model. So I mean, she had an advanced degree from University of Chicago in biochemistry. So she was a very intellectual person, and she was a conservative dresser. And yet, just the fact that, and she was not even dark skinned. She was fairly light skinned. Black person. And we stayed at a hotel, okay, when I was visiting a relative. I'm not going to name the hotel. I don't want to be subject to litigation. But we checked into the hotel. She used her maiden name. She never adopted my name, and I never cared about her changing her identity, to adopt my name, because I believe in equality. So I'm not a chauvinist, and it was within half an hour of being in our room that the police came and accused me of being a John and her being a prostitute, basically because I was white and she was Black. We didn't have our marriage certificate, so They had to. They were going to arrest us when we claimed they were husband and wife. They said we were liars. And fortunately, I called. I told the management of the hotel, "You're making a big mistake," and I'm calling my relative because my relative happens to have pictures of our wedding, and they ought to think twice about doing what they're doing. And so the hotel became a little worried, and they decided to do nothing. The police were there, and they waited for my relative to come. And fortunately, I found my relative who came in with the wedding pictures they had, and I didn't even get an apology. So I checked out of the hotel, and I wasn't going to stay there. And even if they apologized, I wasn't going to stay there. But that's not the only time I had experiences like that. That when people, and it was also very clear, my ex-wife dressed in Armani clothing, so she was not someone who was, not well dressed. I can tell you, when we were in department stores, security was following every place we went. So, so for people to say racism doesn't exist anymore, okay, that's just bullshit. I think it's white people who don't suffer racism like to make that claim because they don't want to make that statement about the reality, and they have no sensitivity because it's not them. So and it's, I find it humorous that I find white people claiming that they're victims, and so whatever quote reverse discrimination that white people face, which I don't think is extensive, is nowhere near the magnitude of discrimination that other peoples have faced.
Jeffrey, I think everyone watching is going to be grateful for this very personal narrative that you shared, and when you look at an arc of 5 decades, and you look at where we are today with the decision that we've just been talking about, Supreme Court Voting Rights Act, we see that racism itself remains one of America's greatest moral and remains one of America's greatest moral and spiritual challenges, defining who we are. But to go beyond that, what can free us from racism, I think, is basically human liberation, that we free ourselves of all these chains of partisanship, dichotomized thinking, and those things that separate us from each other, and that we look for a path towards human unity, which I think really is the ultimate truth of our existence, that we're all one, we're all connected, we're interconnected. And it's this idea, almost this tribal instinct of expressing differences without a distinction, that drives us to this, among other things, this disease of racism.
Let me. This is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and I feel compelled to say that at least the aspiration, the philosophy of the Declaration, I feel is the greatest political, philosophical statement in the history of the world. It says, among other things, that it's a self-evident truth that all men and women, everybody is created equal. Everybody is endowed with unalienable rights. Everybody, even if we fell short at the time, slavery, women. But that was the Declaration doesn't have any footnotes, doesn't have any but-fors. That's a statement of an ideal that at least sets the standard that we ought to repair to. And these rights, unalienable rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that means you can't take them away. The majority can't take them away. An oligarchy can't take them away. A king can't take them away. And we should be going back to our roots. Everybody gets to march to their own drummer, not hurting anybody else, whether you're white or black or Indian or Asian or Muslim or Jew or Hindu or Christian or otherwise. I mean, that's the idea. It's the character that counts. Your accomplishments and character, nothing else. And even though we can certainly be correctly criticized at the outset of not satisfying the ideals as they ought to have satisfied, although I do want to comment, James Madison had a slave that accompanied him to Philadelphia at the Constitution Convention. He ran away, and Madison said, I would have run away too. He did nothing to try to recapture him because he knew the injustice. Now, and that's what Jefferson said too. He said, I tremble for my country when I recognize that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever. So knowing that they fell short of their ambition, at least they had the standard there. That was what we should aspire to. We don't even have the standard anymore. I mean, that's how far back we've gone from July 4th, 1776. And that's why I say right now we confront the choice. We're either for the signatories of July 4th or for King George III. And I don't believe that there's any intermediate ground. That's where we stand.
Thank you, Bruce and Jeffrey. I've my time for this great discussion has come to a conclusion, but yeah. I think this has been one of the more important and timely discussions that's occurring anywhere. So thank you for facilitating it, Jeffrey, and Bruce for blessing it.
And thank you for your presence and participation, Dennis, in this group. Yeah. It's very greatly appreciated.
Okay, have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I'm going to have to sign off too to cast my vote for the July 4th signatories up in Congress. I would make this final comment. Maybe we should use it as maybe the prime topic for the next session, Jeffrey. Especially it would come in with the campaign in Thomas Massey's district. But that is the intellectual disingenuousness of the court and Justice Alito, and basically turning the Voting Rights Act into a nullity, saying Congress really didn't change anything that wasn't already in the Constitution. The language of the statute hasn't changed, but my political evaluation of the circumstances and the landscape have, and therefore the words are homonyms. They sound the same, but now they mean different under 2026. It's not that there's some arguments you can make in some issues that I think are intellectually respectable and debatable. But this I found totally disingenuous, very much similar to Trump versus the United States, when a 6-member majority tortured the Constitution to crown the president with this absolute immunity from crimes committed during the White House, the time when he has the maximum amount of power, and you need the president to complying with the law, setting a model rather than compromising and disdainful of the law and encouraging lawlessness. But I have to go as well. And Jeffrey, I want to echo what Dennis said about your recollection of the gross racism that you encountered in your personal life. I know it must be, I'm sure it was personally humiliating. I didn't confront it personally, but I remember at my high school, I was, my valedictorian address was on Viola Luizzo. She was a Detroit housewife. White came down to the South to register blacks to vote, was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. And I said, that's the person that we got to honor, like George Washington. She didn't have any ulterior motives. And at that time, racism was afoot. And unfortunately, I think we're not quite as bad at the time when the Klan could burn crosses in yards with impunity. But we're sliding back towards that direction. And we got to stop immediately.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. But can I ask you two quick questions for you?
Yeah.
One, did you agree with my assessment that the Supreme Court intentionally slow-walked the charges against Trump and accelerated this process of having it to impact the midterm elections with the gerrymandering and voting rights decision?
Yes, I think they clearly were politically motivated. There are other cases, Jeffrey, which were presidential cases. The Nixon tapes case, they accelerated at special sessions during the summer. Harry Truman, the O'Mill seizure case. So they know how to accelerate things when they believe the president is involved, and why they wouldn't have done that. And remember, the government asked for acceleration in the Trump case that the Supreme Court refused to accept. I think that it's very hard not to conclude that there are partisan political considerations that are finding expression in these procedural irregularities in the Supreme Court, including the shadow docket and having some of their judgment take effect immediately rather than waiting the customary 30 days in order to impact the primary elections and redistricting before November.
Yeah. One other quick question then, too, with respect to your time. Do you agree with Dennis's suggestion that we do the next fine print on next Wednesday?
Well, listen, I think this is important enough. I think we can do it next Wednesday, but we can do it Monday as well. We can tee it up. These are sufficiently important that I think they deserve as much emphasis as we can give them.
Okay,
I do both of them.
okay. So I'll just coordinate and confirm that with Dennis, so we get an agreement and we can manage the expectations of the people that so graciously invite us into their homes and watch us. So thank you,
Okay.
Bruce.
Thanks,
everyone
Jeffrey.
for watching it.
Thanks,
And
everybody. Okay.
good luck. Bye.